From a studio high above the clouds of the Okanagan Valley, this is the Cannabis Podcast. Exploring the world of Canadian cannabis culture, one toke at a time. Now, here's your host and bud tender, Gary Johnston.
And on that note, let me welcome you back to the Cannabis Podcast. I'm so glad that you came back for another visit, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is your very first visit and I'm just completely confused. Well, if this is the first time you've been here, thanks for coming by as well. Here's an especially warm welcome for you. Ahead, we've got information on cannabis for the next 30 or 40 minutes. Cannabis, a plant I absolutely love, and I assume you have some affinity as well, or you probably wouldn't be here. Before we get too much further, let me remind you this program is intended only for those 19 or older in your jurisdiction, and is intended primarily for entertainment and perhaps educational purposes. You should always consume your cannabis responsibly. In episode 163, a couple of stories on cannabis in other countries around the world, a deeper dive into CBN and its helpful sleep properties, a province steps up to legislate cannabis freshness, some positive growth news from a couple of cannabis companies in Alberta. The industry has responded to the upcoming changes, but would like a few more. Another study finds seniors respond well to cannabis therapy. And are the labels on your vape cartridge accurate? We stop on Cultivar Corner for a deep experience with Kush God from Pure Sun Farms. All of that and more on episode 163 of the Cannabis Podcast. I have to be honest, when I heard my son give me my introduction today, the first time I realized in the last couple of days that he's no longer around. I don't get to see my son Ian, my daughter-in-law Christine, and my grandson Emil, because they're now in Latvia. We're getting lots of pictures. They're having a blast with their introduction to the country. So glad that they're enjoying it. But I have to say, I still do miss them. I do not want to forget an opportunity to thank my sponsors as well that helped me put this show together. Thank you to Jordana and Jordan at buymeacoffee.com/cannabispodcast. If you feel so inclined, you can go there as well and buy me a doobie, should you like what you hear. And 1% of the income that comes through that channel goes to climate change research. I also want to thank my patrons at Patreon, Tony, Rob, Gage, Lloyd, and Mitchell. I thank you so much for your support each and every time. Thanks for being around, guys. I truly appreciate it. And if you ever hear anything on the Cannabis Podcast you would like to comment on, or you have some suggestions for future episodes, please send a note to info@cannabispodcast.com. And I had to make one comment about a comment that I heard from a listener this last week. Send me a note, and I truly appreciate it. I love getting comments like this. This is from Kev, and here's what he said. He starts his Sunday morning with a doobie and a coffee in his sunroom listening to the new episode of the Cannabis Podcast. And while doing so, his son asks, "Are you listening to that guy in the clouds again?" Yes, I am, son. And when I heard that line, "Are you listening to the guy in the clouds?" gave me a big chuckle. Thanks for sharing that, Kev. And I hope you and your son are listening now and we get a chance to share in that chuckle as well. Have a great day, Kev. Thanks for being along for the ride. And now, let's get to our first story. And for this story, we're going to time.com. Brazil's Supreme Court has decriminalized marijuana possession for personal use. The decision does not legalize possession of small amounts for personal use, but it will no longer be treated as a crime. The Supreme Court hasn't decided at what level, quantity, or amount to draw the line between dealers and users. And while the Supreme Court was analyzing the decriminalization, the Senate presented and approved a constitutional amendment criminalizing the possession of marijuana in any quantity. This bill is now in the lower house. In a broadly conservative Congress, the proposal was approved by the Constitution and Justice Committee in a 47-17 vote 10 days ago. President of the Senate, Rodrigo Pacheco, who is the author of the bill criminalizing personal use of drugs, slammed the Supreme Court decision. "I disagree with the decision. It can only be made through the legislative process," he told journalists Tuesday evening. Brazilian drug law states that it is a crime to buy, keep, transport, or bring drugs for personal use, in this case with a light penalty. Each judge can decide what quantity or amount of marijuana is consistent with personal use or drug trafficking. And according to top judges that vote in favor of the decriminalization, this perception reinforces bias, especially against poor and black people. Well, that's an interesting juxtaposition. The Supreme Court Deciding that they are going to decriminalize possession while the Senate is passing a bill outlawing the use of all drugs. And I thought just our approach to legalize cannabis was weird.
From the cannabis-infused studio in the clouds, this is the Cannabis Podcast.
And while we don't often cover what's happening in Australia, this article I found really interesting from Stratcan.com, written by David Brown. Australia's Therapeutic Goods Administration, the TGA, has issued 35 infringement notices totaling 6 cannabis businesses and 2 individuals for the alleged unlawful advertising of medicinal cannabis on their websites and social media platforms. The businesses include licensed medicinal cannabis manufacturers and importers, a health clinic, and a retailer. The TGA alleges that each business unlawfully promoted the use and supply of prescription-only medicinal cannabis. The total of the fines is Australian $627,000. The 6 infringement notices were issued to Botanic Wellness Limited, Grandiose Imports, Relief Group Limited, Nectar Tech Australia, and a WA-based individual. These businesses also allegedly endorsed the use of medicinal cannabis for treating serious diseases, conditions, and disorders such as cancer, post-traumatic stress disorder, and chronic pain. These references are considered restricted or prohibited representations under Australia's regulations and are not allowed in advertising for therapeutic goods unless they receive prior approval or permission from the TGA. In some instances, the advertisements also allegedly included violations such as indirect references to medicinal cannabis, such as plant medicine, implied that medicinal cannabis had been approved or recommended by the TGA, and promoted their own prescription-only medicinal cannabis products. Cannabis products for medical purposes are unapproved medicines in Australia and are not entered in the Australian Registry of Therapeutic Goods. In May, the TGA announced it had issued 11 infringement notices, totaling $171,000 to Better Leaf and an individual for the alleged unlawful advertising of medicinal cannabis on its website and social media platforms. In April, the TGA began proceedings against Montu Group, its subsidiary Alternate Leaf, and their common director, Mr. Christopher Strock, for alleged unlawful advertising of medicinal cannabis on websites and social media. The regulators alleged that Montu and Alternate Leaf unlawfully advertised medicinal cannabis using terms including medical cannabis and plant medicine to promote the Alternate Leaf online clinic. Montu is further alleged to have operated a website during Medicinal Cannabis Awareness Week in 2023, which advertised medicinal cannabis to the public, also against the TGA's marketing rules. So there's some rules if you are in the Australian market. You could pay a hefty fine if you make some claims that you're not supposed to. If you've been paying any attention to the legal cannabis world in the last few months, you have heard of CBN. It's jumped to the fore as the predominant ingredient if somebody is looking for a good night's sleep. Well, there's a little bit more to CBN than just those initials, CBN. And we're going to HelloMD.com for this story. Many people try lesser-known cannabinoid CBN for sleep. But is it really all it's cracked up to be? Here's a glimpse at what it is, how it helps, and how to buy. If you ask us, cannabinol, CBN, needs to hire a new PR team. For years, it has existed in the shadow of THC, CBD, and to some degree, CBG. But it really deserves some time in the spotlight, too. Someone give this cannabinoid a billboard already. Believe it or not, this cannabinoid is created when THC is exposed to the elements, heat, air, and or light. The THC breaks down and essentially creates a weaker version of itself that's non-intoxicating. This is CBN. This origin story is the main difference between CBD and CBN. CBD exists on its own within a cannabis plant, while CBN is formed from degraded THC. History lesson: CBN was the first cannabinoid to be identified and isolated from cannabis. And the strain school? Durban Poison, Blackberry Kush, and Tahoe OG are all strains that are known for being high in CBN. What is CBN used for? Well, CBN is best known for helping with sleep. Because it's created by oxidizing THC, which has sedating properties, experts often recommend it as a sleep aid. It is known to help with a range of sleep issues, including nighttime wakings and other sleep disturbances. It also has the potential to help in the following ways: relieve pain, stimulate the appetite, reduce inflammation, and regulate the immune system. Cannabinol is usually sold as an oil with a dropper, but you'll likely be able to find it in edibles too. Look for options that have a small ratio of THC included. Remember, everyone reacts a little bit differently to cannabis. You may need to try a few different things to find what works best for you. So there you go, a better explanation of what CBN is. Degraded THC, air and light get in there and degrade that THC, and it becomes CBN, a non-intoxicating lesser version of itself. Do you find that CBN is helping you get some sleep? Well, maybe it's time for a bit of experimentation. And for a point of amusement today, the inspiration for today's episode is what I call table scraps. You know, after you've been a little messy and you've been smoking some weed on your desk and you look around and there's just kind of little bits of weed scattered all over the place. Well, that's what's in my joint today. That's what's giving me the inspiration for today's episode. And now we're heading to Stratcan.com for a story written by David Brown about Manitoba announcing new cannabis product freshness criteria. Is this ever a good thing to hear about? Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries, the MBLL, is putting new rules in place to ensure cannabis sold in the province is fresher. The provincial agency sent a notice to producers on June 26th, informing them of new product freshness criteria coming into effect July 15th for cannabis flower, edibles, some extracts, and topicals. As of that date, all cannabis flower, including infused flower products sold into the Manitoba market, must arrive at the retailer no later than 9 months from the packaging date. All edible cannabis products with no best before date must also arrive at the retailer no later than 9 months from the packaging date. Those edibles with a best before date must arrive at the retailer 60 calendar days or more prior to the best before date. Cannabis topicals must also arrive at the retailer no later than 9 months from the packaging date, but cannabis extracts other than infused flower products will have no packaging date limitations. Cannabis retailers in Manitoba will also be allowed to refuse delivery or return products that do not follow these new freshness rules. A credit will be issued to the retailer in such cases at the supplier's expense. Suppliers can choose to issue a credit in the case of a customer return. The move from Manitoba comes as other provinces seek to manage a growing inventory of older products. Alberta's AGLC announced it would be delisting more than 500 slow-moving SKUs in May. BC recently announced similar changes to its policies for accepting new products and storing existing products as the industry closes in on 6 years of operation. Unlike most other provinces, Manitoba does not operate its own distribution center for cannabis sold in its territory, but instead allows producers to ship directly to retailers. They have also recently begun licensing cannabis distributor licenses to third parties offering distribution services, and as of June 20th, they have licensed 4 of these businesses. Manitoba currently has 206 private retail cannabis stores, 124 of which are in Winnipeg. And that's not a surprise if you've been to Manitoba. Winnipeg, definitely the heart and the heart of everything that's going on. And nice to see that a province taking the approach of legislating freshness in the product because this stale product is not helping the industry. And this story is coming to us from theounce.ca, and it is written by staff. A couple of Alberta companies are showing signs of financial stability. Aurora, which has struggled over the years to find sound footing, says it had its best year yet. We're incredibly pleased to be reporting our strongest fiscal year ever at Aurora, says CEO Miguel Martin. Aurora is the largest global medical cannabis company in nationally legal markets, and our leadership is best differentiated by serving the diverse needs of patients across the world, he says. Total fiscal year 2024 net revenue increased 21% compared to the trailing 4 quarters, while adjusting EBITDA was positive on an annualized basis for the first time in our history, reaching $12.8 million. We also strengthened our balance sheet, ending with a strong net cash position of approximately $180 million as of March 31st, and fully repaid our convertible debt. High Tide, the Calgary-based owner of Canna Cabana and other cannabis brands, released its second quarter financial results last week with its cash flow flush, the company said in a news release. I'm thrilled to report that in an environment where many cannabis companies, including some of our retail competitors, have been forced to seek bankruptcy protection, our team has been able to deliver positive net income in Q2, while also generating record-breaking free cash flow, said Raj Grover, Chief Executive Officer. The company said it generated $9.4 million of positive free cash flow in the second quarter and has generated $22.7 million in the past 4 quarters. Cash flow statements track cash in and cash out, providing insight into a company's financial health and operational efficiency, according to the website Investopedia. And who knew there was a website called Investopedia? But of course there is. And there's some positive news. I love to report positive news about the cannabis companies that are out there. High Tide, our Cheeky, and the owner of Canna Cabana, and the folks at Aurora had a couple of good quarters. Let's hope that continues in the future.
From a studio high above the clouds of the Okanagan Valley, this is the Cannabis Podcast.
And to theounce.ca now for a story special to the OZ. Older patients report experiencing better health and well-being following their use of medical cannabis, according to data published in the journal Drugs and Aging. British researchers assessed the use of cannabis-based medicinal products consisting of either flower or oil extracts in a cohort of patients aged 65 and older. British specialists are permitted to prescribe cannabis products to patients unresponsive to conventional medications. Study participants primarily suffered from chronic pain. Patients consumed cannabis products for 3 months, consistent with the findings of other observational studies. Older patients reported significant improvements following cannabis use, including substantial reductions in pain severity. The study's authors concluded, there were consistent improvements across measures of general health and well-being after 3 months of treatment. These findings accord with a growing body of observational and real-world evidence from jurisdictions that have legalized medicinal cannabis that cannabis is effective for improving sleep, mood, and quality of health across multiple primary conditions. Israeli data published in 2022 similarly reported quality of life improvements in medical cannabis patients. Among patients with post-traumatic stress, 91% reported that cannabis treatment was a success, as did 84% of patients with inflammatory bowel disease and 78% of patients with chronic pain. According to statistics published in the journals of gerontology, more than 1/3 of those aged 65 or older take 5 or more pharmaceuticals daily. And that's a story which originated from Normal about the fact that older patients respond well to medicinal cannabis. What has been your experience?
THC, CBD, terpene profiles, what's in me? Oh, please explain to me. Go to the corner, go to the corner, oh yeah. Go to the corner, please explain this stuff to me.
On Cultivar Corner today, we're going back to a company we've only done a couple of times, and that is surprising because they push out a lot of weed in BC. Pure Sun Farms. They grow in greenhouses down in the Delta area. Pure Sun Farms, so shout-outs to Roger, the rep for Pure Sun Farms in the BC interior. Kush God is what we're going to try today, and Kush God is a cross of Pineapple God and Pink Kush. I'm going to pop open the bag, and let's see what our smells are. Oh, a difficult bag again. They're always difficult for me. There, I got it. Oh, and was that ever worth the effort? Oh, my goodness sakes. Oh, creamy. Oh, it's reminiscent of something. Almost like a creamsicle kind of thing. Wow. So let me give you the rundown on Kush God. When two Titan strains unite, a legend is born. This potent indica is a cross between our iconic Pink Kush and Pineapple God. That's where I think I'm getting some of those pineapple notes. To bring you a fruitier take on a classic Kush with winning potency. This frosty pheno was hand-picked in our greenhouse for its loud aromas of juicy red grapes, fresh tropical fruit, and sweet berry desserts, with a touch of cream on the finish. It features bright green buds with splashes of purple and amber hairs, coated in creamy trichomes. I think I'm picking up a lot of that when I stick my nose into that bag, and I pick up some of those aromas. Let me pull out one of the buds and pop it under my jeweler's loop, and let's take a peek at what we've been told. So, aromas of juicy red grapes and fresh tropical fruit. There's definitely some fruitiness going on and some berries there. And as I pull out to my jeweler's loop and take a look at my frosty, let me break that bud up a little bit. Get into some of the meaty-greety. I'm not sure what the hell that means, but oh yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Just break off a little bit, and as soon as I see inside those buds, wow, the trichomes are rich. They are just all over the place. There's so many of them. Lots of purple, lots of red hairs. It's a light green in color. The buds are fairly firm in texture. It's a 7-gram pack that I picked up. And I got some... Oh, Jesus, I really love the smell of that when you put your nose into that bag. Just delightful. Kush God. So one of my lineage is Pink Kush and Pineapple God. We've already talked about that. And what my terpene profile is? How about myrcene, limonene, and humulene? Surprised there's no farnesene. Just some of those sweetie notes kind of remind me of pharmacine. And then your aromas are going to be tropical, grape, and dairy. And I'm wondering about the dairy reference to aromas, because when I think dairy, the The only aroma I can remember being in in elementary school. I remember at the end of the year we used to go on road trips, and we went to the Palm Dairies in Nelson, BC when I was in grade 5 or grade 2 or 3. And there's just this smell of milk as it was being processed, and it wasn't a terribly friendly smell. So we'll not look for the dairy aromas on this one. Instead, we're going to get a joint ready, and let's get my Arizer Air Max all powered up and heading up to the proper temperature while I finish rolling this joint. Really loving the aromas that are hanging around in the room today as I pop this bag and start to break some of these buds up in typical fashion. When we do break things up a little bit more, we get a bit more aroma happening in our room, and just some lovely aromas in here. I can't put my finger on it. It's kind of that creamy finish. I think the first thing that I thought of when I stuck my nose into that bag was it was kind of like a creamsicle. And I have no idea why. I haven't had a creamsicle in years. I haven't even thought about a creamsicle in years. But nonetheless, I have a joint. My Arizer Air Max is warming up to temperature. Getting up to that 190 range is where we're heading for. And that will be there soon, but I have a joint right now. And that means, again, we haven't done anything from Pure Sun Farms for a while. Time to get back on the ring and see what they're doing. They grow an awful lot of weed down on the Lower Mainland, and have made a name for themselves for the amount of weed that they are pushing out. You can take a look at the website. I have put the link for Kush God, so you can take a peek. I think it's time we have a taste. This is Pure Sun Farms Kush God, which is a cross of Pink Kush and Pineapple God. Now, with those two parents, if this isn't leaning in an indica, I'd be very, very surprised. So once again, first toke of the day, it's time for a wake and bake. And we do a little wake and bake with some Kush God. And it's going to be a very inspiring day, shall we say. All right, first couple of hits off that, going down pretty smooth. Really love the taste. The creaminess not coming through. I'm picking up perhaps a hint of the grape notes, some of those tropical fruits in what I'm smoking. Let's move to the Arizer Air Max, and let's see what Kush God really tastes like. Oh, yeah. That's when the flavors come to the fore. So there's a little bit of those grapes, there's some tropical fruit, there's some berry notes, and a little cream on the finish. So definitely bright green on the buds, splashes of purple, lots of amber hairs all over the place, lots of creamy trichomes everywhere as well. And with that second hit out of the vaporizer, that's the first little head rush that I got from Kush God. And let's have another taste out of the Air Max. Oh, I really like that. You know what? That was so nice on the Air Max. I'm going to pull myself another bowl with the caveat and warning, as I did in the last couple of episodes, where I touched that damn glass bowl and damn, it's hot. Keep your fingers away from that. I did it this time. I managed to restock. Didn't get any burns, which is always nice. And now another taste of Kush God. Oh, yeah. Really, really enjoying that. It's a nice, smooth smoke. Giving me a pretty good buzz as well. And now I haven't given you the details on what the potency of this guy is. So this was Kush God, Pineapple God, Pink Kush, total terps 2.09. That surprises me, because I thought there was a lot more aroma in there than what I thought there was. And what's my THC? Holy crap, my THC is at 33.9. That's what's on the bag. And as of this point, I'm feeling some of those THC molecules rolling around in my endocannabinoid system. Okay, it's not coming on gangbusters. My endocannabinoid system is not being overwhelmed, but it is feeling pretty good right now. And I'm always kind of happy with a nice kind of gentle climb as we head to the rafters of the THC. Yeah, you can tell I'm a little buzzed because I'm starting to ramble. It's always a good indication. So Pure Sun Farms, as I say, they grow down in Delta. And this package was done, when was this one done? This was done earlier this year in March, so not too late. I noticed that our weed is moving through pretty quickly now. So if you have not tried Pure Sun Farms, I think it's worth a try. Oh, there's a nice little kick. Big rush just went through my body. Started at the tip of my head and kind of worked its way down through my endocannabinoid system and down my back. One of those really nice indica rushes. Always a danger to do the indicas that might have some potency earlier in the day for your wake and bake, because it could mean your day could end and crash a little sooner. It doesn't often happen to me, but who knows? That may be the case later today. Enjoyed the Pink Kush. We have done Pink Kush from Pure Sun Farms before. Haven't done their Pineapple God, but now we skipped that opportunity and we've gone right to Kush God. 7 grams of Kush God from Pure Sun Farms. My THC sitting at 33.9. My total terps sitting at 2.09. This is a really nice little high. This is not overwhelming me. It's not making me really paranoid that I'm getting way too high. This is just nice. And sometimes those are kind of the highs that we're looking for. Not overpowering. I don't really want to be laid out on the couch and do nothing for the rest of the day. I'm looking for just a really nice vibe, a really nice buzz, feeling good in my head, feeling good in my body. And I'm going to celebrate with one more toke off the joint. I finished off 2 bowls in my Air Max. And I have to say I'm fairly pleased. So if you're looking for some weed that's going to get you into a buzz mood, and you're looking for a nice indica, maybe Kush God is what you're looking for. Kush God from Pure Sun Farms. I just found religion. You knew it was coming, didn't you? The proverbial follow-up. After I turned the recorder off and I let the cannabis roll around in my endocannabinoid system for a while, it tends to get deeper. And it has. Yeah, okay. This is really a nice high. The THC, and again, whether the THCs are accurate or not, again, I'm not really all that concerned. Whether this is 33.9 or it's something else other than that, it's given me a buzz, and that's the only thing that really matters to me. And I have to say, Kush God has definitely given me a buzz.
Sharing stories about good weed while trying good weed. This is the Cannabis Podcast.
At distractcant.com for our next story, this one written by Dave Dormer. The cannabis industry rule changes are a step in the right direction, but a little bit more is needed. Proposed regulatory changes to the federal cannabis framework are a good step toward bolstering the industry, but some retailers, producers, and consultants say more needs to be done to help it grow and thrive. Health Canada announced the proposed changes in early June, and a 30-day consultation period, which ends July 8, is now underway. They cover everything from allowing cutout windows and transparent packaging for dried and fresh cannabis products, plants, and seeds, to adjusting or removing some licensing requirements for producers, to quadrupling the threshold for micros from 200 meters squared to 800 meters squared. The proposed amendments also align with recommendations in the federal government's expert panel's final report on the legislative review of the Cannabis Act. And let me put a bit of a sidebar in here. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Go back and get that reference. You have until July 8th to make your knowledge known and to put in your considerations for these changes. So don't miss that opportunity. You've got one more day. And back to the story. I think a lot of them are common sense, kind of much needed for a very long time. And it's good to see that they are finally being implemented, said consultant Deepak Anand, the principal with ASDA Consultancy Services. I wouldn't say anything is bad. Definitely lots is missing. 2 proposals Anand would recommend involve medical cannabis, allowing in-person access at pharmacies and removing the tax. We've had tax on medical cannabis for a very long time. Cannabis is one of the only products, or the only product out there in Canada that is pharmaceutical product that is being taxed, he said. The second, obviously, would be increased access. So certainly being able to both get this dispensed but also received at a pharmacy would be another step in the right direction. The proposed changes to packaging, allowing cutout windows on packaging for dried or fresh cannabis products and cannabis seeds, allowing transparent containers, and allowing lids to be a different color than the container, will enable consumers to make more informed choices, says Andrea Dobbs, co-founder of Village Bloomery, a cannabis retailer in Vancouver. At least if you have 3 different cultivars, maybe the lid will be the difference. For us, on a very functional level, it would be really nice to be able to tell the difference between one product and another without getting a magnifying glass out, Dobbs said. I think it's going to be easier. When we start to talk to people about things that are, quote, sativa or equatorial, or whatever we want to call them, we'll be able to talk about the shape of the bud. People will be able to see it's in a more holistic way. It will be easier for me to say, this is machine trimmed and this is hand trimmed. Do you see the difference? Dobbs says she would have liked to see the proposed changes crafted using more of an environmental lens. Reducing some licensing requirements will allow for more product diversity. I think that they are not going to make people get a license to process things like the stalk and the root, said Dobbs. This should be completely closed circle industry because every single piece of this plant is useful. I'm hoping to see a lot more products, paper, rope, canvas. I want to see more plastics. I want to see more fabrics, more paper. Who knows, maybe the stalk will become the package one day. Let's make it more accessible and not make someone get a Health Canada license to do that. The changes are positive from a producer perspective, but more needs to be done, said Walker Patton, Chief Commercial Officer at Woody Nelson, an LP in southeastern British Columbia. One of the things that stood out to me, which I thought was kind of neat, was them increasing the canopy for micros. But then I quickly realized, after talking to some folks on that side of things, that isn't worth much when you don't have the capital to expand. And the market price doesn't exactly support the production of craft cannabis right now. Ancillary supports are needed, he said. I think if there was capital available, or the market price was higher and this was a more profitable industry, or the taxes were lower, there's a few different mechanisms that could be changed in order to make that a great policy. But without those other mechanisms, it kind of misses the mark, he said. But that's not to say it can't be a step in the right direction. It's just not something that will benefit who it is intended to benefit until those other pieces arrive as well. As for his own recommendations, Patton would like to see the 30-gram limit raised to allow for bulk purchases for personal use. He would also like to see a standardized methodology for cannabinoid and terpene testing. Some of the proposed changes include increasing the threshold for micros, as we spoke about already, from 200 meters squared to 800 meters squared, increasing nurseries' canopy size for seed production from 50 meters squared to 200 meters squared, removing the requirement for actual THC and CBD on product labels, only total THC and CBD. Licensed processors would no longer be required to provide printed copies of the consumer information document with every cannabis product package sent. Amending the industrial hemp regulations to remove the maximum THC concentration of 10 parts per million for industrial hemp grain derivatives. Permitting cut windows on packaging for dried or fresh cannabis products and cannabis seeds, while upholding the exclusion of cutout windows for all other classes of cannabis. Removing the cumulative 10 mg THC limit for an outermost container of edible cannabis product to allow greater flexibility in packaging multiple immediate containers as long as the immediate containers do not have more than 10 milligrams of THC each. So some proposed changes. Reminder, you only have one more day to put in your feedback to Health Canada for these changes. Some of them are good, but we still need a few more. Ever since the legal cannabis world began here in Canada on October 17, 2018, there has been an ongoing debate about the accuracy of the THC reported and recorded in many of the products. And that debate is still ongoing. And now it's expanded a little bit, because now we're questioning not only the THCs in the flower, but what about cannabis oils? This is an article from theounce.ca, written by David Wiley. The first ever study of accuracy on legal cannabis oil labels in Canada is casting serious doubt on whether they're trustworthy. Researchers from McMaster University randomly selected 30 products available through the Ontario Cannabis Store between November 2021 and January 2022. Our findings suggest that inaccurate labeling of cannabis oil products in the legal Canadian cannabis market is common, with most discrepancies due to labeling products with greater THC or CBD content than was present, say researchers. A key component of legalization is quality control, including cannabis labeling requirements that specify the allowable variance between labeled and actual amounts of THC and CBD in a commercial product. While federal cannabis regulations allow for variability for extracts at 15% above or below the product's labeled amount, a new study shows significant errors even beyond that threshold. There were discrepancies between information on the OCS website regarding advertised amounts of THC and CBD and physical product labels for 10 of 30 oil products, says the study summary. We also found internal inconsistency, with 5 products labeled with discordant THC and CBD, denotes active cannabinoid content, and total THC-CBD, which denotes cannabinoid content after product is heated for consumption, concentrations, which should be identical for extract-type products. The product with the largest discrepancy was labeled as having 5 milligrams per gram of CBD, but 26 milligrams per gram of total CBD. Overall, 12 products, or 40%, were outside the variable limit for THC, and 3 products were outside the variable limit for CBD. Among 16 products that had a label amount of 2.5 milligrams per gram of THC or greater, 7 products had amounts that were lower than what was labeled by more than 15%. No products contained more THC than labeled at an amount that would be expected to have substantively different psychoactive effects. However, say researchers, given that many medical consumers obtain products from the non-medical market, one implication is inaccurate dosing. Altogether, these findings suggest a need for greater quality control in the Canadian legal cannabis market, and undermine the assumption that a legal market is an assurance of accurate labeling, they say. Researchers note the sample size of 30 products is not representative of all available products in Ontario or Canadian markets. Just as a side note to that, I remember we had one product come into the store that was a vape product, and its THC was recorded at 95.5%. And I'm saying, okay, so that means that there's 4.6% of something else in that vape cart. And those, I've always wondered about those values. So now another survey is questioning whether or not those oil values of THC are accurate as well.
Exploring the world of Canadian cannabis culture, one toke at a time. This is the Cannabis Podcast.
We are coming close to the end of episode 163. A reminder again, if you ever have anything you'd like to comment on, send a note to info@cannabispodcast.com. I always love hearing from you. And of course, I never want to miss an opportunity to thank you for being a listener of the Cannabis Podcast. Thanks for being here. I truly appreciate it. But we want to make sure we end on well, I guess I can't say we want to end on a high note. We always want to end on a high note. This is the Cannabis Podcast, Gary. Our humor today from humornama.com. Teacher, what do you do after school? First student, I go and buy weed from Jacobo. Second student, I always go and buy cigarettes from Jacobo. Third student, I go and buy cocaine from Jacobo. Fourth student, I always stay at home and do my homework. Teacher, you are a great student. I hereby appoint you as the class monitor. You're a good example to other students. What's your name? Fourth student, Jacobo. What happened after God legalized weed? Profits were at an all-time high. What do you get when you mix Scooby snacks and weed? Scooby-Dooby. Have you heard about the political party that's using really good weed to promote their political views and opinions? It's propaganda. And on that groaner, we shall call it a conclusion. So one more time from the guy in the clouds, thanks for being here. That's it for episode 163 of the Cannabis Podcast.
From the cannabis-infused studio, high above the Okanagan Valley, this was the Cannabis Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's show. To check out more great cannabis podcasts, go to podconnects.com. Here's a preview of one of our other shows.
I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your cannabis business podcast, The Talking Hedge, and newest member on PodConX. So come on over and check out The Talking Hedge. We talk about business news, interviews, investments, events, all that stuff. So come nerd out with me over at The Talking Hedge. You can find me at thetalkinghedgepodcast.com or on all your favorite podcast platforms. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.